fame doesn't just amplify talent, it amplifies damage. Behind sold-out arenas and legendary albums, there are stories rarely told, stories of chaos, violence, addiction, and complete loss of control. These weren't just rebellious rock stars. These were human hazards. Men who turned stages into battlegrounds, hotel rooms into disaster zones, and their own bodies into ticking time bombs. This is not about mythology. This is about consequences. Tonight, we uncover the rock stars who didn't just live fast, they became dangerous. To others, and to themselves. Ozzy Osbourne, chaos that nearly killed him. Ozzy Osbourne's reputation as the Prince of Darkness wasn't a marketing invention, it was lived reality. Offstage, Ozzy's life became a relentless cycle of intoxication, hallucination, and complete loss of control. Alcohol and drugs erased boundaries between danger and routine. He wandered cities disoriented, threatened his own safety, and terrified those closest to him. Famous incidents biting the head off animals, violent mood swings, and near-fatal overdoses weren't isolated moments, but symptoms of a mind spiraling. Ozzy didn't just live dangerously, he barely survived himself. At his lowest point, even his family feared he wouldn't live another year. Fame kept the machine running, but chaos drove it. Ozzy's danger wasn't aimed outward, it was self-destruction unfolding in public. Night after night, Sid Vicious violence without direction. Sid Vicious embodied danger in its most reckless form. Unlike calculated rebellion, Sid's chaos was uncontrolled and deeply unstable. Heroin addiction consumed his judgment, turning daily life into a violent fog. He assaulted journalists, fans, and friends with equal indifference. Hotel rooms became war zones, relationships turned abusive, and self-harm blended with aggression. Ozzy wasn't performing danger, he was drowning in it. His involvement in Nancy Spungen's death cemented his legacy as rock's most tragic, cautionary tale. There was no strategy, no myth-building, just a young man collapsing under addiction and attention. Sid Vicious wasn't dangerous because he wanted to be feared, he was dangerous because he had completely lost control of reality itself. Jim Morrison, a time bomb with a microphone. Jim Morrison's intellect and poetry masked a deeply volatile core. Alcohol unlocked a darker persona, one that thrived on confrontation, humiliation, and chaos. Morrison provoked authority, insulted audiences, and endangered himself nightly. Arrests, riots, and on-stage breakdowns followed wherever he went. Backstage, his behavior grew increasingly unstable. Obscene rants, threats, and reckless dares pushed everyone away. Morrison believed destruction was a form of truth, but his obsession with chaos consumed him. He didn't just flirt with danger, he chased it deliberately. Convinced he could outdrink, outlast, and outsmart his own limits. He was wrong. Axl Rose, unpredictable and explosive Axl, Rose's danger was not rooted in physical violence, it lived in volatility, unpredictability, and absolute emotional dominance. His presence alone could destabilize entire productions. Concerts were delayed for hours. Shows ended abruptly. Riots erupted when he walked off stage, leaving cities in chaos and venues destroyed. Promoters feared him. Crews operated on edge. Fans never knew whether they were about to witness a legendary performance or a complete collapse behind the scenes. Axl's temper created a climate of constant tension. Bandmates endured verbal abuse, intimidation, and psychological pressure that eroded trust over time. His obsession with control extended far beyond music. He dictated environments, schedules, lighting, sound, and behavior, often changing his demands without warning. Perfectionism blurred into paranoia. Any perceived slight became a threat. Offstage, confrontations escalated quickly. Arguments turned explosive. Relationships, personal and professional, burned under the weight of his unpredictability. Financial losses followed emotional damage as cancellations and lawsuits piled up. Axl wasn't reckless in the traditional sense. He was unstable under pressure. When he lost control, entire systems collapsed around him. His danger was invisible until it detonated, leaving destruction without a single punch thrown. Keith Moon, the human disaster zone. Keith Moon didn't simply behave recklessly, he transformed every environment he entered into a potential disaster site. Hotels banned him. Airlines feared him. Promoters braced for damage the moment he arrived. Explosions, fires, destroyed hotel rooms, smashed toilets, and public nudity followed Moon across continents like a curse. Alcohol-fueled manic episodes where impulse replaced reason entirely. What some dismissed as rockstar antics were, in reality, uncontrolled episodes of addiction-driven collapse. Moon treated destruction as comedy. But the consequences were never funny for those forced to clean up after him. Staff were injured, properties were destroyed, and relationships burned out under the weight of his unpredictability. Every night became a gamble, not just for Moon, but for everyone around him. The tragedy is that Moon was aware of his own chaos, yet incapable of stopping it. Eventually, the body that survived countless disasters finally failed. Keith Moon didn't die young because he lived fast. He died because his life had become unlivable. GGLN danger as a mission. GGLN did not lose control. He rejected the very concept of it. Danger wasn't a side effect of his life. It was his purpose. His performances crossed lines. Most artists wouldn't even approach self-mutilation. Physical violence and bodily harm inflicted on himself and others became routine. Blood was not a shock element, it was expected. Arrests weren't consequences. They were confirmation that he was doing exactly what he intended. Off-stage, nothing softened. Assaults, threats, and complete disregard for human safety followed him everywhere. There was no separation between performer and person. G.G. Olin believed society itself was the enemy and destruction was truth. He rejected survival, comfort, and longevity as lies. In his worldview, self-destruction was authenticity. G.G. Allin didn't spiral. He marched deliberately toward collapse, convinced that living dangerously was the only honest way to exist. Iggy Pop, physical risk without fear. Iggy Pop's danger was not theatrical, lit was physical, relentless, and brutally real. On stage, he cut himself, bled openly, dove into crowds without hesitation, and treated pain as irrelevant. His body became part of the performance, pushed far beyond reasonable limits. Offstage, the same intensity continued. Drugs, sleeplessness, confrontational behavior, and complete disregard for physical well-being pushed his body to collapse repeatedly. Hospitals became familiar. Recovery was temporary. Iggy didn't chase destruction for attention. He chased sensation, truth, and immediacy. Fear simply didn't register. His danger came from refusing boundaries, treating the human body as something disposable in the pursuit of expression. That he survived is almost accidental. Iggy Pop didn't outsmart danger. He endured it through sheer resilience. Again and again. Marilyn Manson, psychological warfare. Marilyn Manson's danger was not explosive or chaotic, it was methodical. Offstage, former associates described a pattern of manipulation, emotional abuse, intimidation, and control that unfolded slowly over time. Boundaries weren't crossed suddenly. They were eroded. Fear replaced physical violence, creating an environment where people doubted their own reality. Power was psychological. Control was exerted quietly. Influence became weaponized. Those around him described feeling diminished, isolated, and emotionally dismantled. Manson didn't lose control, he maintained it. His danger lay not in visible destruction, but in how deeply and invisibly damage could be inflicted. Where others exploded, Manson dismantled. The harm lingered long after the noise faded. Vince Neil, reckless with real consequences. Vince Neil's danger was rooted in carelessness, amplified by fame and privilege. Alcohol-fueled decisions led not just to scandals, but to irreversible outcomes. Aggression, entitlement, and denial defined much of his offstage life. Unlike mythic tales of rock chaos, Neil's actions carried real, permanent consequences. Lives were lost. Families were altered forever. There was no symbolism. Here only responsibility avoided and accountability delayed. While the image of excess suggested freedom, the reality was damage that could not be undone. Vince Neil didn't represent rock danger as Mithy represented it as consequence. The cost was paid by others. Lemmy Kilmister, living past the edge. Lemmy Kilmister lived in permanent defiance of moderation. His lifestyle, constant drinking, relentless smoking, and zero restraint should have killed him decades earlier. Doctors warned him. Friends expected the worst. Yet Lemmy continued, not out of ignorance, but acceptance. He knew the risks and refused to negotiate with them. Unlike others, Lemmy's danger wasn't cruelty or chaos. It was endurance against statistical impossibility. He didn't spiral. He didn't collapse publicly. He simply lived beyond the edge every single day. In a world of manufactured rebellion, Lemmy's danger was authenticity, choosing exactly how he would live. Regardless of how it would end, some of these men survived long enough to watch the damage catch up with them. Others didn't. Their stories are often romanticized as rebellion, freedom, or genius, but behind every headline was real destruction. Injured fans, broken families, careers burned to the ground, bodies pushed past human limits until something finally gave way. Rock history celebrates excess, but excess always collects a debt. These weren't just legends out of control, they were warnings. Proof that fame doesn't protect you from consequences. It only makes them louder and deadlier. If you look past the music, past the image, past the myth, what remains is the truth. Chaos always wins. Eventually,